This is the Strait Science in the Education Center and our second hybrid since the pandemic. So thank you for your patience, and we'll start off with Vera Metcalf and then Brendan Kelly. With that, take it away, Vera.
Happy to be here, and thank you. And thank you for joining Strait Science this evening. First, I also want to thank Gay for facilitating the Strait Science for several years now. It has really become indispensable to many of us, making us aware of what science and research is relevant to those of us that live here in Northwest Alaska. And if the Gnome Nugget is there too, I'd like to recognize them also for amplifying the Strait Science stories and advancing public understanding of science in the region. And I'm presenting from home because my driver husband is at a school board meeting. So I'm here at my house. But I'm Vera Metcalf. I'm director for the Eskimo Walrus Commission since 2002. And of course, Dr. Brendan Kelly is here with me, researcher with IARC, International Arctic Research Center, and with the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Brendan has been involved in Arctic research for many years, but I remember him in his early years of marine mammal research out on St. Lawrence Island. So, advancing Arctic solutions through co-produced understanding. Here we are tonight to talk about a project that we co-designed with 7 colleagues called SEARCH, and I'm sure Brendan will explain what SEARCH means. But it's a collaborative study of environmental change in the Arctic. With that, I'll turn it over to Brendan.
Thanks, Vera. Do I need to adjust my camera? Okay.
Yeah.
Cutting my head off?
Yeah, so there you go.
Does that do it? Computer may or may not stay there, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Thanks. And thanks, Vera. So after we co-designed this study together, we went into a fairly arduous process of recruiting 40 Indigenous scientific and policy experts, many of which are in this room. Hence, this is more intimidating than usual when I give a talk. And the idea is to bring the best of what Indigenous people know and scientists know together to understand what's happening in the Arctic, and to do it in a way that we can share with people making policy, and that we can in fact push policy solutions. That's our intent in doing this. And of course, we all know that these changes are largely driven by the excess carbon dioxide, methane, and other gases that are in our atmosphere today. They're there primarily from the burning of fossil fuels. We know all of this, right? But it turns out in the Arctic, melting sea ice and thawing permafrost are amplifying the warming. And the Arctic is warming 3 times or greater than at the average global rate. Vera, back to you.
Yeah, well, although it doesn't seem necessary to describe all the impacts of climate change to inform people like those of you that are here at the Strait Science, it is very important to reinforce the point that they have a direct impact on Alaska Native communities, well-being, and Indigenous food security. As an example, with my work over at the Eskimo Walrus Commission at Coag, the spring hunting season is the most critical time for ensuring our community's food security, which depends on the complex interaction between the quality of the sea ice, wind direction and strength, general weather conditions, and marine mammals, migration, timing, and location are all very important to us. However, as you are well aware, the conditions of our sea ice weakens our traditional hunting seasons, are dissolving and blending together, with hunter safety becoming a very increasing concern to us. So we hear of hunters traveling farther with less ice and with what seems more disruptive stormy weather conditions during these hunting trips. So I guess what I'm saying is that the impacts on our world are very profound and represent a seismic shift in, the traditional rhythms of our communities. Iaka Anders Apasingak, who I believe Merle is here, Wawita from Gamble, is a respected elder from Gamble who described the situation along with Perry Pangawi, a hunter from Savunga, in this little video that Brendan will start.
It's not doing it. So we click that share sound. It's up.
When is the winter? When will it be winter? When will winter come in? When the ice come in, winter began, not December 21. No winter now.
The environment is changing more rapidly in the Arctic than anywhere else. Observing these changes is critical to forecasting conditions that will affect people in the Arctic and beyond.
Just in the last decade or so, we've realized that the Arctic is really, really important. And the fact that it's changing so fast has many, many connections to other parts of the climate system that really matter to billions of people that live way beyond the Arctic.
Indigenous people have carefully observed the Arctic environment for thousands of years, as their livelihoods depend on knowing where and when to find and safely harvest resources.
Much of the hunter's behavior, if you look at it, is really, really risk averse. And that makes a lot of sense. If you're going to be going out hunting hundreds of times, the 1 in 10 chance that something might go wrong is pretty bad odds. You want to go out 100 times, you want to come back 100 times. So you don't want to take that risk that says that's a 1 in 100 chance that there will be a problem. That's too much.
80 miles. It's getting further and further every year. It's not uncommon to go out 100 miles out to where the ice is, to where the walrus are. So we're, in a sense, chasing the ice.
So just like with sea ice, ice sheets are, and glaciers are also melting, raising sea level globally and contributing, as you know, to devastating floods. The Greenland ice sheet, if it were to all melt, could raise sea level by something like 20 feet. If we lost Antarctic sea ice, it would be well over 100 feet. Locally, glacial and ice sheets contribute to flooding and reduces freshwater supply for many communities around the globe. Back to you, Vera.
And I can confidently say that every community in this region and probably all Arctic coastal communities and perhaps inland ones too have seen what the loss of permafrost can do to us, which is a foundation for us on the land, just like sea ice is a foundation when you're out in the water for safety, for us while out hunting in the water, on the water. So in both cases, this shows you the kind of permafrost damages along the coast. The warming air and water temperatures are moving us into very new and different conditions. So, something like this is very profound and still going on, the thawing of our ground. To you, Brendan.
Thanks, Vera. That was a good description of or overview of the local consequences. Globally, thawing permafrost is further adding to the warming because the thawing permafrost releases more carbon into the atmosphere. And so you have a vicious cycle going, right? Where warming planet, thaw permafrost, release gas, more warming. Understanding how much of that carbon is going to come out of the permafrost and how soon is a vital research question right now.
So I
Vera?
think for those of us here in Nome, we've seen evidence of what the recent storm has done, but it seems even though we are well aware of the impacts of environmental change, the recent storm, Typhoon Merbok, shows us that the potential for even worse impacts are coming sooner than we may have thought. So, and then another storm happened right after this that impacted even more communities up in the North Slope, all the way to North Slope. So we could replace this photo with many others showing completely destroyed homes, hunting, fishing camps, water and sewer facilities, and power plants in some of our communities. So again, to me, climate change research isn't just an intriguing area of natural science research. It needs to include Alaska Native communities, well-being, and of course, our Indigenous food security. Next to you, Brendan.
Yeah, so far, I don't think we've told you anything you don't already know. But what I don't think you know, I don't think any of us know, is what can we really expect in the future Arctic? And that's what we're really focused on. And really what we can expect depends a lot on the behavior of people in the coming years. So, and primarily how much more carbon we put up into the atmosphere. So under a low level of emissions, which is depicted in this upper panel, the planet will continue to warm. Under a middle scenario of emissions, that middle panel there, it'll warm up quite a bit more. Okay, thanks. And then the bottom panel there shows the really drastic warming that will happen if we stay on our current high emission rates of high emissions. Yeah, and I think I'll go, well, I just want to make one other point, which is that in that drastic solution of continued high emissions, we could see an Arctic that on average is 10 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than what we experience today. That's extremely, extremely dramatic. At our current rate of carbon emissions, it's also the case that the Arctic's winter sea ice will be gone within a few decades. And I'm going to let Vera comment on that before I go on. Whoops.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, I will have to admit that working with charts and graphs are not my strength. I often get lost in these, but this one envisions a September without ice, sea ice in the Arctic, I think, is very difficult to know what our communities can do with that forecast, with this forecast. So much will depend on public policy and governance done outside of the Arctic. And I guess this is why this search project aims to inform and influence those decisions with Indigenous and science knowledge systems, collaborating together for better and maybe wiser choices.
Similarly with permafrost, if you look at the panel that's on your left there, that shows what the expected loss of permafrost will be under a moderate emissions scenario. And it says that we could lose 20% of the permafrost by the year 2300. The panel on your right shows the expected loss of permafrost under the high emissions scenario. Remind you, that's the one we're on. And we'll lose essentially all of the permafrost by 2300. So it really depends on what we do as a society. Back to you, Vera.
Well, this picture is our first co-production team meeting in Anchorage, but there are 3 co-production teams as part of this project. Number 1 is processes of Arctic environmental change, which I'm a part of. Number 2, human well-being in the changing Arctic environment. And number 3, geopolitical and economic stability in the changing Arctic environment. So three co-production teams, and each team has participants knowledgeable about each area as Indigenous knowledge holder, and experts and Arctic residents, those with science and research expertise, and experts in the world of public policy, economic, and Arctic governance issues. Each of these teams will contribute to produce papers, science briefs, conference presentations, and public media at the international, national, statewide, and local regional level, while making sure to reach our 3 represented constituencies: scientists, Indigenous peoples, and decision makers, both in government and private. So this is, I believe, a very effective co-production of knowledge for the Arctic. First of all, it recognizes Indigenous knowledge from the beginning and incorporates Indigenous contributions throughout, while also ensuring its purpose and outcomes are relevant and useful for Arctic residents.
The hardest thing about talking about this topic, as most of you know, is that it's easy to be depressing, right? We describe some pretty grim scenarios for sea ice, for permafrost, for ice sheets, sea level rise, but there is really, really good reason to be hopeful. And it's right here in this room, it's right here in this virtual audience. It's all of us coming together. And this is what we're trying to do in Search, is bring all the voices that we think need to be in the conversation to move policies to a safer pathway than we're on. Our preliminary, we're 1 year into this project, our preliminary findings have been submitted in written and oral form to the Arctic report card that's due out in December. For the next 2 days, our teams are meeting here in Nome, and we will be placing special emphasis on developing a shared framework for understanding the Arctic as an ecosystem that includes people, and on strengthening our approach to advancing policy solutions. But the work requires much more than our teams. We also need additional experts in communities and scientific and policy institutions to help the team members. It's a big lift that they're trying to make. They're going to need to reach out to you. We hope you'll be responsive. It's also the case that every other week we have a virtual reading and discussion group. And every other month we have an open webinar for people with interest and knowledge of the Arctic anywhere in the world to join in a discussion about how we integrate what we know in these different spheres. And to participate, you can reach out to Vera or me or any of the other Search people via Athena Copenhagen, whose email is there in the bottom right. And with that, okay, we're happy to take questions. Do you have any online yet?
No, we do have a caller, so let me see, because I'm not sure if I unmute, we'll probably get into a loop. But
I could.
There is a caller. Is there any question from the caller? Is there any question from the caller?
Okay, we're going to talk. Oh.
All right, no questions at this time.
Okay. Pretty sure there aren't any questions in this room, but you know, just take a guess that somebody might come up with one.
I have a question.
Okay.
I have a question. I'll come up with a question.
Do you want to talk to the mic? Will that
talk to the mic? All right. So what I heard is this is a whole group of people's coming together to do policy. Will this, one of the things, and I could be biased here, but this is just a question on the cuff. We have had recently, I wouldn't even say recently, in the last what would you say, Vera, since about 2011, we've had a rapid succession of issues that affect marine life, both the ecosystem in transition affecting the ability of our young seals to feed during 2018 and 2019, and certainly our seabirds to feed multi-species. Since 2017, we've had avian cholera, remember that? We've had avian influenza in our birds and our foxes, and now it's in our seals back east in Maine and porpoise as well. We've had, so those are zoonotic diseases that people can catch. And we've had these other big things like harmful algae. We just experienced a harmful algae bloom that was quite prolonged and quite robust and quite comprehensive in the Bering Strait region, and has brought danger to foods and people and the animals. And so will your search group, and I'm loving that you guys are going to influence policy, will some of that, I mean, what's your result? Is to bring, can we get response to some of these wildlife issues? Or is that something that your search program is going to do? Going to sort of, because for all the things I just listed, including wild wildlife, the only people other than the people of this region that have responded by physically coming have been the US Coast Guard. And so there's a lot of questions about food security, both of that, and then of the health of the animals and the health of the people. And is that what search will you guys help? How will you help with that in the Bering Strait region? Is that a good question? Good question. A bad question? I don't know. Is it? No, seriously, we just had so much happen.
Yeah. And more will happen.
Yes.
And we know this. And so I think what your question is, are we going to solve all of these problems? Are we going to solve any of these problems? Are we going to solve something?
No, not asking for solve. Will you be able to influence policy to bring the correct answers to bear, not solve it?
Yeah. We hope to do that for selected topics that these smart people together figure out, and people from the region say, of all the things that we need to address, these are the ones we want to work on for the next few years. In so doing, we hope also to create a new way of using our collective wisdom. So instead of having the scientists sitting in their labs or out in the field camps doing their thing, and people out hunting in their boats, observing and seeing what's going on and what's mattering to their ability to obtain food, to take care of their families, and then having people who work in the policy world in their offices trying to interpret what they've heard from. We think that we have to together design the studies and answer the questions. If we try to answer it as just scientists, we will miss a framing that policymakers would use that would be useful to communities. I don't think any of the issues that you've named, and many, many more, as you know, can be addressed unless we change the way we're doing business. So that's our meta goal. And it's a big stretch goal, and we may fail miserably, but we will certainly fail if we don't try. And so that's what we're headed for. But I would invite my colleagues to throw things at me, put it a different way, or come up with a different answer.
Can I have another one? I do, unless there's any better people. So people online, feel free to ask a question or put something in the chat. Oh, there are our chat. Why I couldn't see.
Thanks that you have them all these devices.
Yes, it's an exercise.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, Brendan's head is cut off. The audio is nice though. Okay, that's what we want.
It was a terrible accident.
So, okay, so now I've just heard, and I'll stop this so everybody else can have time to ask their questions. So that sounds awesome. Awesome group of people with an awesome goal. Will that help change? Will you guys be able, and hopefully it's in your sites, I don't know, to change the regulatory obligations of agencies that have, like, maybe if your goal is to do, if you're mandated to do stock assessment, but people are worried about the health of the animals, is there a way to bring those topics somehow together, or So that would be a regulatory shift.
Well, I'll let Vera weigh in on that, but I would say she'll probably have, you know, really cut the top of my head off if we don't have an impact on regulatory agencies. It's very easy for people to think when everybody has a different idea when you say policy. Some people think Congress, some people think the legislature, some people think the mayor's office, some people think, you know, administration in Washington. But what we've learned recently, thanks to our policy experts, is that it's all that and the agencies, and there are a lot of levels at which policy. So we look at policy writ large, that it will include regulatory agencies, because for some issues, that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where the challenge is.
They have a job to do.
Sure. Yeah, so it's a very complex, I mean, this is the problem. We refer to this as a complex collaboration, because the way scientists, you know this, think and talk is very different than the way people in communities do, which is really different than the way people in the policy offices that Beth's work in, Lexi works in, Bristol works in. It's very complex. So we're like all talking different languages and dialects and disciplines, and a lot of our work, and here I'm quoting Vera and her presence, but Vera pointed this out to us in an early meeting. It's really important to understand how do you know you're saying the same thing? And that's a big part of the collaboration complex challenge.
This is the computer that ultimately. Keep going.
I'm done.
Okay. This one I can
Hang
see.
on a
That
second.
one I
Maybe,
can.
Vera, I can't see you well enough to know if you're trying to get a word in here.
No, I think you explained it well, Brendan. I think I'm interested in politics of climate change. I mean, we can talk about coastal erosion, you know, things melting, but we're telling the same story every year. But what are the politics of climate change? How can we influence policy to make sure people are actually listening to us? I mean, we keep telling the story over and over again that climate change is happening. So I'm curious be good to know from our policy folks to get that answer. How can we influence policymakers about the changes in the environment?
Anybody from the policy world wants to take a stab at it, feel free.
Well, so this is.
Would you come up to the mic, please?
Yeah, this is going to be a multi.
Whoops.
There you go.
Dr. Tula is about to take the mic.
You can take it over there if you want. If you don't want to stand in front of the bright light. Okay, that's great. So I don't know if I'm going to manage to answer any of these questions, but my name is Beth Petula. It's great to be known. And makes me think so much of Richard Foster and his family. So I think that when this is opening up my eyes to see on the policy side is how do we take these kind of complex issues with their hopefully complex co-productive resolutions, or at least good, strong suggestions for resolutions, and put it in the language that we can take anywhere for any policy. And I think that's really tough to think of how to do, but you can think of the common things that we can all share and then work from there. But yeah, it's a big effort. I just, applaud Brendan and Vera and everybody who thought of doing this. And back to your ocean question, if we don't create something like this, I mean, it isn't getting any better. We're getting worse fast. And it is here in particular, but also in the Southeast. It's just dramatic. And the loss of the glacier is dramatic in June. So I think we all feel really committed to it, but it's also terrific to be in the region and with people who are experiencing the Arctic change so fast. Thanks. No, it's okay. It's still good. It's all good.
You're good. You're okay. So listening to Beth, yeah, I was thinking that, you know, one of the things that I don't think you meant it, but it was almost implicit that, well, you know, search is kind of responsible now. And it, as you well know, it takes the Coast Guard, it takes academics, it takes engaged hunters like Merrill and Cyrus, it takes the Alaska Sea Grant Marine Advisory Program and the good work they do, and it goes on and on and on. And we all feel the same frustration you do. It's like, whoa, we keep saying this over and over and over again. Nobody's listening. And it's pretty frustrating. And but I can't see my way to give up. We've got to keep at it, and we've got to try a different way of coming at it. That's what we're trying, is a different way of coming at this. I don't know if it's going to work. We're going to try. Cyrus?
Hi, Cyrus. Hi.
My name is Cyrus Harris, and I'm a lifelong Alaskan. Lived out in the country. Just came from out in the country just last night to attend this meeting. Now, speaking from the ground level and listening to the conversation going on here, how do we connect with the general public? You know, I've always thought, you know, with just this past year, we've already had 4 big storms. And we had a couple of big ones in July that were back to back, and they were unheard of in July. And so the first one that happened in July, even the weatherman got the weatherman by surprise. You know, he didn't give us fair enough warning to put up our stuff on rural areas up until after the fact. And then so 2 days after that, there was another big one. And then of course, typhoon, yeah, these are wake-up calls. Now, these wake-up calls could bring your attention to the general public. And these are just examples of climate change. And how do you reduce that? Well, you know, back in our part of the country, and I guess it's everywhere else, you know, there's a high interest in development, industry, roads. I mean, that's just adding fuel to the fire. Thank you for your time.
Any other thoughts, comments, anything online? Nope. I don't see anyone's hands up. But while we're thinking of your questions, for those that are online and can do chat, this is a good time, since we couldn't hear you clapping, this is a good time to give Brendan and Vera a little love in the chat box and let them know you appreciate their time and their presentation. And while you're doing that, am I allowed to still? Wow, all right, power of the mic. All right, well, I didn't mean, but you guys really need to chip in. One thing from my perspective is I work for UAF Alaska Sea Grant, and I said in my introduction, Northwest Campus, this facility here, which is University of Alaska Fairbanks, and Alaska Sea Grant, we're in the business of public service. And that's really something that almost feels like it's dying. So public service means I live here. I work for all Bering Strait. We're a resource for all Bering Strait residents. And one of the things that I do see is that, and maybe Anna, you're with National Science Foundation, right? No? Beth. Oh, I'm thinking of your sister. I'm sorry. No. All right, we'll say something like, name any of the, because my mind is focused on the marine world and focused on the resources that people utilize. And it's comprehensive in the Bering Strait region, from echiurid worms right on up to the bowhead. Utilized. Name an agency in control of those, you know, federally authorized to manage and do research. Do they have an office here in any of the rural hubs, transportation hubs, communication hubs? The North Slope Borough Department of Wildlife Management is the one that is able to pull that off and do public service and answer, be a resource for your people right there. someone has a strange seal with a lump on it, they can go get it serviced by the North Slope Borough. You see something unusual in the ice, people are going to talk to the North Slope Borough Department of Wildlife Management. So there's a real education, a high level of education at the North Slope Borough Department of Wildlife Management for their region. Now, I'm not saying I have anything close to that, but people call, I think oftentimes because they want an answer, and it's unique lifestyle in rural Alaska that is often not, there's often challenging perspectives. If you call in, say you saw an oil spill or you have an oiled animal, this actually happened, for example, an oiled animal. They called in the national number. Where do you go when you go on the national number with an oiled seal? You go to Washington, D.C. and you get the Coast Guard, I think it is, the National Oil Spill Response Center. And people were saying, trying to say they had whatever it was, seal. And they said the questions, they have a set of questions, and they said, well, you know, how did you acquire the seal that was oiled? And they said, with a firearm, because they'd harvested it. And the next thing you know, firearm. And they said, yeah, firearm. I shot it. Boom. The phone got transferred right to law enforcement. So you can guarantee that that would be the end of anyone from this region calling, right, the National Oil Spill Response Center, because there's a lot of, you know, disconnect with how things are, and that's just the way it is. But I guess my point is that service, if we had in all the regions people who were providing services to answer the questions that people have on a daily basis about the health, what they're seeing, the health of the animals, the timing, the conditions, on all levels, it might actually bring that dialogue, you know, bring people closer together if they were actually servicing the people of this region. That would be my only comment as a public service person. I hope that is of interest.
So I want to suggest that you're a bit too modest here, because you also provide, you and your other agents provide a service, and I get it.
That's what we do.
Feel that there are enough of you, we agree, but you do an amazing job and you have for a long time. So you deserve some love as well. I hope the people in the chat.
No. Wrong way. Thank you.
But I also want to note that, you know, we all, as I mentioned before, feel very frustrated. We've been saying what we've been saying for a long time. Marika Holland has been forecasting what's going to happen to the sea ice with tremendous power for quite some time, and feels frustrated that the world is not listening. Beth Kurtula, you can do with her sister Anna, when she was in the legislature and when she worked at the White House, she advanced some really, really foresightful marine policies for the state of Alaska and to the nation. Both of them were thwarted politically, and she remains amazingly optimistic. And that's one of the things I really like about Beth, is that she reminds me when I'm feeling like this is hopeless, that there's somebody who's been in the battle longer than I have, higher levels of government, and remains optimistic. So that's what I'm choosing to do. It's the only thing I can think to do. But yeah, it gets really frustrating. And I haven't lived here and known all the years you have facing this frustration day after day. So I'm not lecturing you. So you should be like that. Well, love to hear from you.
Sorry, what was it saying? Yeah, we can see everyone. And during the Anchorage face-to-face meeting, more than once, more than several times in our discussions, I thought to myself,
Thank you, Merle.
yeah, and we worked with her on a local level over the years. And she's truly a resource herself. But before we came over here, not knowing what to expect, I told my wife, I finally expressed that thought. And I told my wife, finally, I hope you should
Thank you. Et comme c'est.
But anyway, long time ago, I went hunting. And eventually I found a dead female walrus beach. I was surprised at these beach, like maybe 495 feet up, like shoreline. And it was engaged. And it had spent quite a bit of time on the sea, and it had holes, and birds had eaten it. But when I remembered our dad telling us that those are the best kind to eat, and I wasn't sure, I was pretty young. So I headed back. On my way back, I found one of my regular hunting partners. I told him about it. So he said he wants to go see. So I took him back to show him where it was. And he was about 5 years older than me. And we looked at that again. He wasn't sure either. So we headed back again. This time I went a bit further I went a bit further, and I noticed my knockout was on the reserve. And just when we were going up a hill, here comes another hunter. Well, he was the uncle of my hunting partner, and he was very knowledgeable person, and we told him about it. So he wants us to go show it to him. And I told him, well, I'm on reserve, and I'm going to start heading up. No, we'll pull you. So we headed back. Even though I'm on reserve. When we got to it, he looked it over once. He said, FDA approved.
You just couldn't read it.
But going back to what you mentioned earlier, the health balloons, and I think now's the time to do the wrong ones, because our foods aren't FDA approved. They got to be in socio-economic world. Some authority has to approve and regulate restaurants. We're hoping to go through at 7:30, I guess.
It's okay.
They went through OEE or something. But anyway, my point is, on the microbial level, we felt it was insufficient to approve me and my hunting partner. And then right now, the Algal blooms situation, they are the U.S. Coast Guard cutter out there. They're taking samples, and that's being vigilant on the microbial and paralytic shellfish organisms, a little bit of that. And we've heard about it too. So my point is, I think we need to start the groundwork for. She's got a lot of experience on sampling and almost partaking in when we see a lesion or something on something on the part of the body in fish or animal. But we need that. It's going to take us to think the process. So we need something, some effort to help our people to be vigilant on the problem.
Vera, you still with us?
So in the chats, it's a big long chat message they just hit. Michelle Kissling, hi Michelle. I am a researcher and regularly conduct small scale studies in the Arctic. I always wish that there was an identified science liaison in each village, someone that I can invite to work with me, serve as a go-to local contact, and share their perspectives. I want to co-produce knowledge, but it takes a long time to build those relationships. I don't know if your group could help build a better, more collaborative, more inclusive structure, garnering funding to pay and hire villagers to serve as science liaisons. Just a thought. I think stronger collaboration will produce stronger stories and maybe action. Exclamation.
Lexi Schultz, answer that? You may introduce yourself.
Sure. I don't know if I'm going to answer that. Hi. For anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Lexi Schultz. I'm with the American Geophysical Union based in Washington, D.C. And it's funny because I'm a policy person, but I also want to say that there's different ways of thinking about solutions. And just this last comment made me think about a program that my organization hosts, which is called Thriving Earth Exchange, which is about having scientists work with communities on community priorities and basically co-develop solutions together and offer the science component of that. I think it's worth thinking about whether a Thriving Earth could do work up here in the Arctic and in communities and so forth. But I also think it's important to just recognize that this is part of the thing about developing solutions, is that it's not just sort of at different levels of policy, it's also thinking about what are different ways to get things done and maybe different ways of defining problems so that you're coming at an element of it. You know, like if you can't right now prevent mass die-offs or completely prevent harmful algal blooms, can we develop ways to, you know, as you said, Merle, help communities get a better handle on what's safe or not in kind of real time? You know, may not get at the biggest problems, but at least can make a difference, you know, in some ways as you kind of build towards bigger solutions.
Nothing on chat. So thank you for your thoughts on that. One thing I would encourage, if going that way, is know that the Bering Strait region relies on itself a lot of times. And so for like the harmful algal bloom, before you sort of think of some big thing, you may want to check to see, are there regional entities banding together in our region to address a problem like harmful algal blooms? And how can we enhance or lift up this region's efforts to take care of itself? And I say that because for the harmful algal bloom, the Norton Sound Health Corporation was working on this problem of harmful algal blooms, just bringing it up as a topic to get baseline information. And then boom, everything happened so fast this summer. This is a real strong situation we found ourselves in. Dangerous in late July and August. It was sustained, very, very high levels. And so here we have a local effort. Maybe does the region need help lifting up that effort? Not maybe having a giant effort come from far away, but lifting up our region so that we can help ourselves. I think that's just a thought from my end of things when I heard you say harmful algal bloom. Yeah, so thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All these good academics and nobody's talking. Holy cow.
Okay, can I add something?
Yes, go ahead, Vera.
You know, we just convened a 3-day workshop here in Nome with young people, young hunters, and they are the next people to get informed and about some of the things that we did. And it was amazing to hear some of their dreams and aspirations and concerns about the environment and how it's changing, you know, the ability to harvest marine mammals and other things. So hopefully we'll come up with a report from, I know we will have a report from that 3-day summit. So that was unique to this region, but also was open to all the EWC member communities. And Gay was very much a part of that 3-day summit here in Nome.
It was beautiful. That was a beautiful summit.
Yeah.
Yep. And Michelle Kissling also wrote, sorry for the long chat. I will finish with a big thanks for the open discussion and great presentation. So that's to you and to you, Vera and Brent.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. And thank you all for coming and coming tomorrow again and the next day for all the work you've been doing.
Is that we closing? Any other comments or thoughts before we close? I do want to remind people online and in the room that for Thursday night, the next Strait Science, this is a double header Strait Science weekend. For those that are online, know that we have on Thursday night at 6:30, Nick Kinsman with the National Ocean Service, and she's going to be talking about the 2022 Merbok, what we call the Bering Sea storm now, and talking about what National Ocean Service, they did a grassroots effort during that storm to try to get as much information. They were collaborating with people all over the region, both science, village communities, and trying to get more information for their modeling. One of the things she is going to be talking about is high water marks, how communities can document that, and how to then go after disaster recovery funds, as well as help the National Weather Service with their modeling. So that will be this Thursday at 6:30. Nick Kinsman talking about the storm and how to collect some better information for future forecasting. And there is a chat that says, Michelle, this is Athena with Search. Please email me so we can add you to our discussion group. We'd love to have you. And there is the Athena's email. Thank you very much. With that, thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you very much, Kate, for this. This is an excellent series, and we're proud to be part of it. Thank you.
She says, thank you, will do. Okay. Good night, everybody.